I'm Adam Kommel. I manage our shareholder activism product at Bloomberg on the terminal. I'm going to moderate this panel, ESG meets activism, from Exxon to Chevron. Let's just start with some introductions.
Sure. Dave Pogemiller, I'm the CEO at Boardroom Alpha. Some of you know us. For those who don't, we provide ratings and analysis on public company board of directors, CEOs, officers that basically suggest are they doing a good job or a bad job from different perspectives, whether that's performance or ESG or otherwise.
I'm Keith Rosenbloom. I am the managing partner at Cruiser Capital. We have, from time to time, been activist in our endeavors when we've been unable to convince management teams to listen to shareholders. Most of the time, when we are constructivist, we settle very peaceably with managements, and I believe we've put 13 directors on public companies in the last 5 years, and I think each of those experiences have been very positive for shareholders.
And how many of those were fights versus?
Well, I would argue that really only one was a fight. Some of the lawyers in the room who are involved may believe that more of them were fights. But I would say at most, you could argue 2 were contested proxies, and the rest were, I would say, thoughtful discussions between us as shareholders and the board.
Cool. So we're going to talk about ESG activism mainly as economic activists with ESG either as a focus of their campaign or a component of their campaign. A little bit less so, say, shareholder proposals or dedicated ESG investors. This is more about how economic activists have included ESG as part of their strategies. So in that context, what kinds of ESG campaigns for economic activists are effective, and what's not effective?
Well, I want to jump in real quick because this is a topic that comes up a lot, right? What defines ESG? And I would say that most investors, particularly most institutional investors who have professional corporate governance groups, are very thoughtful about what is significant ESG, what is meaningful ESG, and what is ESG, what they would refer to as ESG pandering. So someone says something that sounds like it makes a big headline, but once you delve into the company and you make the change or address the issue, you're not really helping stakeholders. And so towards your point, I think when you see an ESG issue raised by investors or put on a proxy statement, there has to be a fundamental benefit to all of the stakeholders to discussing it. And if there isn't, then I think it may get some headlines because it's interesting or there's shock value, but at the end of the day, it's not something that's going to carry any weight.
Does it work at all to convince institutional investors to take your side, whether it's contested, whether you're actually looking for votes or whether you're just looking for support?
So I think that ESG is a very difficult thing to do, and with shareholders increasingly being able to more directly vote through BlackRock and Vanguard and things like that, I think you'll have a lot of the people who think about ESG from an impact perspective, a lot of retail folks, able to push that more. And so I think maybe in the future, when more folks who care about that deeply and care about that more deeply than they do economic return, you could see sort of a tipping point. I think in the immediate, it is a thing that maybe gets some headlines, maybe gets a little additional push, but it's like when we were talking about board gender earlier today, I think there has to be like a core fundamental economic argument to it, right? So if it's E, am I managing the risk alongside of a power plant that's on the coast, right? That's a good, useful E to vote on, right? And maybe the directors are not taking care of that, and that could win. But if it's something looser, harder to tie back to observable outcomes, I think it's very difficult to do.
Yeah. I also think, Adam, the essence of the question is how important is ESG to investors and how important is it in everyone's focus? And I think over the last 3 years, really, 3 or 4 years, it has become quite important. And where it's become quite important is in the boardroom. And I think that E and S, however you define them, are now table stakes. If you have an industrial company that impacts the environment in some way, and you don't have a sustainability plan, or you don't have a plan that demonstrates how you are helping the environment or not hurting the environment, then I think you've been in a cave the last 4 years, and you don't appreciate where the rest of the world has gone. And so today, when boards are thinking about all of the elements of ESG, and don't forget the most important part of that is how you motivate your employees to do well and how you motivate a corporate culture to do well. If you as a board have not, if you as a board have not taken it upon yourself to put out an E statement and an S statement and an E study and an S study, then you probably deserve to be taken. That was not me. Then you deserve to get taken to task by shareholders.
How often are those activists that are taking companies to task, how often are they true believers versus trying to get votes, trying to get support?
I mean,
I don't have the data.
I don't have the data either. I'll give you my anecdotal, which is I would think
But
that
maybe that's a good opportunity for Bloomberg, the terminal, to tell us how often that happens.
I can't tell you other than to say that I work with activists frequently who are interested in the data and in our ESG data, and they seem like they really care. Who can say what they're ultimately using it for? But they are certainly doing the research to try to figure it out.
I will say, so for us, we have, when we look at directors and officers, we look at a couple of different lenses. One is performance, so are they delivering on shareholder return? Are they increasing revenues, et cetera? We also have a partnership with MSCI where we take their ESG ratings and bring those down to a person level. And we've had that now for 6 or 8 months, something like that. Invariably, all of our conversations that we're having with customers and future customers center around performance on those measures like shareholder return, those measures like revenue growth. People think that it's a nice to have some view of, hey, have they done okay on ESG or not? But partly because it's very loosely defined, what is E? Is it impact or risk? What actually falls into S, right? And should S actually just be some aspect of reputational risk or otherwise? That, you know, I think that's where the real sort of focus is on those people. And, you know, the other thing is I think it's, you know, whether we hit a soft landing or not, we're not really in an environment where people have the extra sort of ability and cash and free money to sort of put at these pet projects like you sort of saw previously.
I will say sometimes it's clear enough. And the example that brings to mind that is Bluebell going after BlackRock a couple of months ago for not going far enough on their ESG commitments. That certainly sounds like true believer because I don't think they're going to get BlackRock's votes anytime soon with that sort of criticism.
There is a big issue with, so we have a number of insurance customers, and when we talk about ESG with them, they're always talking about the risks of what you put out there. So when you're putting out that ESG report, what are you saying, what are you committing to, and then do you follow through? And it's much like to your question before of you know, when there's an acquisition, why isn't management talking about it? When you're putting something out there, you're making a promise to people, and then you're going to have to deliver on that. And if you don't deliver on that, then that's going to be a big issue across all those different stakeholders.
Heaven forbid management team should have to do what they say they're going to do, right?
As long as nobody makes me do what I say.
Right, exactly.
Should be fine.
You know, and I think that is part of the hesitancy, right? Once you write a sustainability statement, you're making some comments, right? It doesn't matter if you own a clothing retailer or a boat manufacturer or a distributor of vegetables, you have elements of your business that are related to sustainability. And it doesn't matter if you're a chemical business, a distributor, manufacturer, or user. It doesn't matter if you're a petro user, or it doesn't even matter if you're some sort of green business. If you're in the green hydrogen business, you have an environmental component to what you're supposed to be doing. So you're going to put out the statement, and now this is yet another hurdle, another written objective test as to whether you're doing a good job or not. It's human nature, I guess, to be reluctant to do it. However, it's something that is now table stakes. If you're not going to do it, then you will be called to the carpet. Now, what happens 3 to 5 years from now, when people look at those statements and they say, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z, and lo and behold, you didn't do any of them, well, there should be consequences for that as well.
We talked a little bit, at least implicitly, about Exxon and true believers, and including, well, the reason Exxon, the reason engine number one really succeeded here is because they included as part of their ESG campaign is its impact on the share price, on the valuation, and that's really what worked. So let's talk a little bit about Chevron as well, from Exxon to Chevron. In September, Strive Asset Management sent a letter essentially saying you don't need to pay attention to all these ESG gadflies. Focus on your business. Keep burning fossil fuels. Is that going to work? Is there this backlash to ESG? Is that going to work? Is it going to give management cover to ignore ESG complaints?
If I can just raise this, broadly speaking about ESG and ESG compliance, it's sort of like saying investment funds, mutual funds or hedge funds, right? You have 10 different hedge funds, they do 10 different things. You have 10 different mutual funds, they have 10 different portfolios and will do 10 different things. There is nothing that says there is only one right way to approach ESG. There are multiple ways. That's the reason why we need the ESG statements. Because some companies, let's take the two that are on our title here, okay? BP and Chevron can have very different perspectives and very different views on the same issues. Who then is responsible for making the changes, right? Management's just trying to do its best to grow a company. If society writ large has issues, well, there's a legal framework, they can do that. There's a capital markets framework, we can do that. We can attribute a lower multiple to one company versus the other. At some point, these statements aren't cure-alls. What they are is they are guidelines to help people run a business. The repercussions are the repercussions, and hopefully, as a society, we choose the way to go. But I think it's not proper to expect everyone to adopt the same perspective, and it's not proper to expect everyone to adopt the same views.
Yep. And then on Chevron specifically, I think that the argument there was just a philosophical one of, hey, if you were focusing on the transition to more sustainable solar panels and these to generate energy, you're going to lose out as opposed to burning the fossil fuels, right? And so that truly is sort of an ESG cover of an economic impact, right? And there the argument is, do investors believe one way or the other that should happen, right? So.
I think we can turn it over to Q&A.
The one furthest from the mic.
No, I'll come to you. Come on. Let me do some work here. Here you go.
Hi, thank you. Michael Varner with Calvert Research and Management. So my question is, do you foresee an increase in ESG-related proxy contests? And do you believe that if there is an increase, that they will, so far they've been environmental, do you see any on the S pillar, the social?
My personal opinion is that I think in this current environment, you're not going to see it. I think you're going to see things that directly go to economic impact. And so to the degree that you have oil companies and questions of transitioning to solar or whatever, that's going to be there. I think on the S, it's so loosely defined. I mean, it's really hard to say what it is. And then, you know, again, the board gender talk was really good this morning because there was a lot of data involved in looking at that. And it is so hard to tell on any of the S factors whether or not that makes a material difference, right? Objectively, like if you are doing a better job of managing your team and they have clear goals, Ford just announced, or the CEO was just saying they need clearer goals all the way up and down the stack. That will be an improvement. But to me, I think you're going to see, if you're going to see it, it's going to be around E because that's going to hit a lot of economic impact. And then S is so loose that I think it's just hard to do.
They talked about Icon's campaigns at McDonald's and Kroger's, and I think what those taught us is that it's not every campaign, every ESG campaign, every ESG proxy fight is not like Exxon. Icon owned a token number of shares at each of those companies and lost those fights, or lost one of them and withdrew the other one. And so, will there be future fights? Probably not as many as you saw in the last couple of years. And more so, they're going to have to focus on that economic impact.
I do think under the S, you will see things when there's been like sexual harassment and mismanagement, and it's very directly linked back to those people who are the stewards of that company. I think that's a good S issue, but at that point, I don't know that that's really S so much as saying, here's people who are
that's
bad
proper,
stewards,
yeah.
bad governance, and should be out. I mean, it kind of falls in, this is where ESG is I think it's, my view is ESG is just too broad generally, and there's like real factors under each one of those, right? And so we've sort of gone too far on bucketing everything into ESG, and over the next few years, you're gonna see that sort of get broken out more, and I don't know how often we'll hear.
And I would just say from my lens, that issue of gender equality, as an example, to me actually should fall in the G category of proper governance, not even in the S issue.
Yep.
To me, S has to do with how your business model is sustainable. That's the way I think about it. However, I'm sure there are other investors who think differently, but I think you have proper governance directs the gender equality issues, and I think they're really important.
Other
Anyone
questions? Who can ask a question from farther back in the room? Anybody?
All right.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay, we got one.
When you
Almost
consider
as
the
deep.
depth and then the width, that's pretty good.
Sean Schmidt with BofA Securities. Maybe jumping the gun on a future panel, but how do you think universal proxy cards are going to enable ESG activism going forward? Maybe not as much from a financial activist, but NGOs and nonprofits.
Well, I don't want to steal too much thunder from these guys, but I think that the ability to target people more specifically and directly and somewhat effectively will have an impact. I don't know that it's going to have a massive impact because you still have to run the campaign. There's a lot of cost to it. There's shareholder education, and so I think you'll see some well-funded groups who want to push the issue, but I don't know that you'll see like a material amount of directors being kicked off because of
You might see it, but they won't win.
Yeah, right, so you may see it, that's right. So it'll be more of a public statement that's being made, right? It's sort of like, hey, we cared about it enough to run this thing, but I don't know how many we'll expect to actually win. That's a really good question, actually, for the next group to
I mean,
answer.
towards that, what I said earlier about the professionals who are really evaluating the governance issues and the contested proxy issues, I think they're really educated and really trained and can evaluate the difference between something that's material or something that's pandering.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. On the left side.
This is good, we're all over the place.
his workout in.
It's okay.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Lori Zebart, and I run the Energy Infrastructure Council, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you expect increased ESG activism once the SEC climate disclosure regulations finally come out. And I understand, there have been comments that Gensler may be pulling back some of the proposals, but they're very wide ranging. So do you expect then an increase in activism in this space? Thank you.
I don't have a strong opinion.
Adam, do you have a thought?
Come on, guys.
Okay, well, I mean, my thought is, first of all, wait till they come out. Okay, and then you can evaluate really what the impact will be. My sense is because it's so complex, and this issue, again, broadly branding ESG has a different influence for every single company, right? There's not a better example than what you just cited. There's a very different component for Royal Caribbean lines versus someone that's drilling in the Permian, and yet they both will be covered, right? So it is very situation dependent. Will that open up another avenue for productive change? Listen, I think we all hope so, right? As many avenues to improve things as for everyone, whether it's abused or not. Again, I think that there's a very low tolerance for those who abuse the system.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. That was terrific.
Thanks, everybody.